What is up, everyone? I'm here with Annissia, good friend of mine. She is actually an ESFJ. I believe that she's a 6, Enneagram 6, for those of y'all who are wondering. And today, we're going to be discussing a topic that I think would be very beneficial to many people. And even throughout this discussion, there's probably going to be a lot of times where I'm going to have to, as I often do, look into myself and be like, I wonder if I do that, whatever. So some practices here, but we're talking about when is it okay to cut someone off. Relationships, as I talk about on my channel all the time, are just like really interesting. Like whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic, familial, whatever, you know, we always have like a lot of like stress points, and we deal with people who are really good at cutting people off, almost trigger happy with it, where it's like, this person is toxic, which we're going to talk about that in a moment. And they just cut someone off right away. And then there's people who may deal with like BS for months to years to, decades. And it's just like, when are you going to say that enough is enough? And so today we're just going to be discussing some ideas on how to know when it's time to cut a person off, and when maybe you shouldn't have cut someone off. And I think that Annissia has a lot of good points to be able to go back and forth on. We were discussing a little bit of this at work, and this is all to help us with our communication skills, which I think is very important when it comes to relationships. So anyway, I'm going to pass it on to Annissia, though, just in case if you wanted to say anything that I may have missed. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm really excited to talk about this stuff.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Cool. Number one that I had on my list was, again, have you communicated? So to me, I think that it's really dumb, in my opinion, and I've done this too, when you just kind of like ghost someone, like you've just kind of like, it's like, oh, I don't like that Annissia is like she never says hi to me when I come into work, so you know what, I'm just not gonna talk to her no more, period. Or like, I don't know, that was just like, but like that, like I'm trying to think of like one of the like most pettiest things that we tend to like do, that or we think of that the other person may not even know that was like a bother to you, and then we cut them off for those reasons. And so a lot of times, like, I think that's like the biggest thing, like, have you communicated what's actually bothering you to this person? And if so, if not, then maybe it's not yet time to cut that person off.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the times I see, just like when you said petty, like my mind instantly went to the people I see on Twitter, and that whole thing where it's like, oh, well, he's on Twitter, but he's not texting me back, so therefore, like, I'm done. Like, it's just cut. And I think that, which I've said before when we talked about this, is like a generational thing. And I think even social media can have like an influence on that too, because if people are seeing like, oh, other people are cutting like their friends, whatever, for petty reasons, like, then it's okay if I do. Like, that's that confirmation maybe for them. And then they don't communicate.
Yeah.
They're just, you get ghosted. Like, being on the other end, you just get ghosted, and you're like, I have no idea. And then it's like, well, do you keep pushing for some answers?
Yeah.
Because I guess, like, depending on how long you've been talking to them or you've been in any form of relationship, like, when are you like, okay, they're cutting me off, I need to accept this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much like speaking from, like you said, like the other person ghosting you, right? So then I guess if you are that person that's like ghosting someone else, again, like, have you spoke to that person? Because you have to think like, okay, is this person even cognizant, once again, of what they are doing to you, what they have done to you? that's bothering you so much. And if they're not even remotely aware of it, which has happened to me like a few times, like
same.
I've talked to people and I thought to myself like, yeah, well, they should just know that like this is not okay, you know. And then, but they didn't even have it, like they had no idea that that I had a problem with them, or that what they were doing was affecting me the way that it did. Like this actually happened twice recently, and I was like, wow, you know, well, I'm glad that, you know, I didn't just like go with my whole narrative in my head and think this of this person and just like act off of that. What I did in both of these situations was I addressed both parties at different times, and I actually told them like, hey, this is how it's been looking like in my head, that what you've been doing, and this is that, boom, 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 and I'm just trying to make sense of it. Am I seeing this correctly? I'm like, oh my goodness, like I understand how you, because see, I wasn't attacking them or anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like, hey, like this is how like I've been seeing it. Is this an accurate perspective? They're like, whoa, no, I didn't even know that I was affecting you in this way, but I can see how that makes sense. My intentions were actually this, that. Now that I'm aware that of how it affects you, I'm gonna try to do better. I'm gonna try to be like more cognizant of this. And then on my end, I can also be like, oh, well, I'm glad to know that this person is not nearly as evil as I thought that they were. And so therefore, you know, I can like just stop over analyzing the situation in a while and just kind of like, you know, allow things to like progress forward. But there's something about repeated offenses that we'll probably get to later, and that might be a whole other issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of that requires maybe some like self-reflection on both ends. And also, if you're the person getting ghosted, then maybe you should consider, okay, well, do they have good communication skills to begin with? And consider maybe they didn't grow up in a setting where people communicated, or maybe their past relationships didn't communicate well too. And I think as the person on the receiving end of that, you have to be able to confront it, or like, and also deciding, like I said before, when should I confront it? Is it worth it? How many times do I do it? Because I know, like me personally, like I didn't have good communication skills growing up, and so then when people ghosted me, I just left it. I was like, okay, whatever. But now I'm like, no, I kind of want answers. Like, is it something I'm doing to offend you? Like, did I do something to upset you? Just like, I try to seek that communication, but I also understand there's boundaries.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
limitations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
For number 2, what we want to consider is, are you the toxic one? And what it means to be toxic, and trying to define that, because that's also subjective to everyone and what they consider to be toxic. So I know for me personally, and we had this conversation when I made my bullet list, and this is, I'm going off of like boyfriends mainly. I've had toxic friendships, but they weren't as like, I didn't learn as much, I guess, from them, or take the time to reflect and learn from it. But from like boyfriends and stuff, what I consider to be toxic is like financially draining, and gaslighting constantly. I know a big issue in my last one was I wasn't allowed to like communicate with people of the opposite sex, and then it would just start an argument. And like that, to me, like those things are toxic. And considering what they're bringing to the table and to the relationship, and if it's productive.
Right.
And like helps grow the relationship.
Yeah. No, that's true facts. As a matter of fact, even because I think that's like a really good way of like defining it. Because I think that a lot of people overuse the word toxic. Like I made a whole video about that called Toxic People or something like that. And I was like talking about like how like people just love to. People use that word so frequently that I personally avoid using that word, and I just use venomous now.
Oh.
Yeah, just because I just really disdain that word like that heavy. But when it comes down to it, I'm wondering like I'm always wondering like, okay, the people who are calling people toxic, just like all the people who are like, oh, that's a narcissist. It's
Yes.
like, we have to like be careful of whenever we constantly see ourselves in a victim position.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. Because while you're the victim in your own narrative, which we often are,
yeah,
you might be the antagonizer in somebody else's narrative. You might think, well, you always do this and that person this is that.
Yeah.
And then that person could be telling somebody else, well, yeah, they always do this, boom, 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 boom. And it's not until you guys have some type of conversation about it.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, maybe neither of you are toxic. Maybe it was just a whole big misunderstanding, which goes right back over to the communication.
Exactly.
Once again. But there are situations where one of you is toxic. Maybe, and in the video I talked about how, sometimes neither of you are toxic, but the relationship itself might be. Both of you might be rather healthy individuals, but you're just not compatible as people.
Yeah.
There's no problem with, hey, I want to pursue a career in music and this is that, so I'm sorry that I keep on neglecting you and everything, but this is my life and I want to go and pursue my dreams and do this, and you want to sit home and have kids and do that.
Yeah.
There's not a problem with either of those, but you can't be like, oh yeah, well that man is toxic because he just keeps on going out to do his gigs and do this, oh, that woman is toxic because she's trying to trap me at home with children. That's not really true, but the relationship itself is bringing out the worst in both of you, and that relationship is then making you two become it's affecting you in a way that venom could actually affect you. So I think that's a very big thing to consider. Are you the toxic one? Are either of you actually the toxic one? Are none of you the toxic one, but the relationship itself, the dynamic between you two is toxic? And if the both of you were just with someone else, or just by yourselves, would this still be even happening to begin with?
Yeah. That reminds me so much of my past relationship. Mm-hmm. Because it was almost similar to the same scenario you just gave, where it's okay, I wanted to settle down, I wanted to have a committed relationship, and he was like, no, I need space, we can hang out maybe once a week, I'm gonna talk to my friends, I don't always have to talk to you or text you, and I was like, you're toxic. I mean, after we separated and I had time to myself, and I also saw other people, I was maybe my expectations and the things I expected out of him were they were just too much, and I was definitely being the toxic one, because I would be oh, well, you don't love me as much as I thought you did. Try to guilt him. And it's those are definitely toxic traits that I had.
Yeah.
I've worked on it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I definitely played a toxic role.
So when I first met Annissia, that was actually one of the biggest tropes about her. She constantly talked about how she is toxic this, toxic that, toxic this, toxic that. And personally, I couldn't really see it. And I still can't really see it, that especially now that she's way better of a person, apparently. But I was just why did she just keep on? I already had a distaste with that word. Yeah. Now she's flinging it around. But this is different, that she's referring to herself as that, and not in the corny way my toxic trait is I care too much. But it was she was no, I'm a toxic person, this, that. And I would ask her in what ways were you toxic? I even forgot the type of answers that you used to give me. But I think that is just to further harp on that, how would you say that somebody can identify if they are actually the toxic one in a relationship, just in case if we haven't already made that clear?
I think, more generalized, it just takes a lot of looking into yourself, and then maybe going through some scenarios where it like that interaction didn't go well.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, well, what did I contribute to like for that to be unsuccessful? Or like, what are my actions and like what are my intentions behind them? Because like when I was in college, I would do stuff for like attention, and like obviously they weren't always good, and some of them were toxic. So it's like, okay, well, why am I doing that, and what am I trying to get out of it? And then I think just like, what are you bringing to the table? Like, what seat am I providing at this table, and is it a healthy one?
Right.
So I think, I mean, I feel like you just gotta like pick apart different stuff, because there's different things to consider, I feel like.
Yeah, I'd say like really also just being like radically honest with yourself.
Yes.
That's something that I've been working on for a while, but I'm continuously trying to be like honest about, like I'm continuously trying to work on it, where you look so deeply into yourself, or you have the freedom to ask somebody else, without getting offended, like, hey, Annissia, is there anything that you see that I could probably like start working on? Or if Annissia like called, like, asked me as a friend, like, or said something as a friend, like, hey, Denzel, so I've noticed that you kind of like do ABC. What do you, I don't do that. Like, that I think that's a venomous trait, like getting very defensive, even if what she's saying is not true. The fact that she perceived it is saying something, whether it's about her, whether it's about yourself, something, and it's just something to look at in general. Like, she didn't just make it up in her head, but like she perceived something, and maybe it was just a misread of a situation. But again, back to number one, communication. Like, oh wow, I'm glad that you brought that up, Annissia. Do I really do that? Dang, you know what? You're right. I do that. I do that a lot. Man. Whoa, thanks for actually bringing that up. I'm going to actually try to like work on that. I appreciate it. Thanks for being gentle about it and not just like kind of like throwing it in my face, which is another venomous trait in my opinion.
Yes.
Like how you say things, like use tact. But yeah, that radical honesty with yourself, I think that's one of like, the biggest things, to make sure that you are accurately like looking at yourself. And if somebody is projecting something onto you that's just not true, then you'd be able to be like they can trust that you are looking into yourself radically and being radically honest with that. And then you could tell them like, actually, Annissia, I really don't think that that's the way that things are. As a matter of fact, I feel like maybe you're seeing boom, 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 and the reality of the situation is what I'm actually intending is this, that. But it's probably coming out in this way. And I can see how maybe you're like interpreting it that way, but that's not the right interpretation of my actions. I don't know, like this type of communication, it like people are probably watching and being like, this seems like so like staged, so like fake. But it's like, no, I feel like if we really learned how to communicate in this way, we would have a lot less people calling each other toxic. Yeah. And we would have a lot better relationships, maybe, and a lot less of a need to like cut people off. But yeah. Yeah,
I know. So randomly, like, I'll be in bed with like Nick and I'll ask, I'm like, is there anything I do? Yes. Is there anything I do that like annoys you? Because I don't want to be like, because I want to word it in a way that's like sensitive to me, because I don't want to be like, well, what am I doing that's toxic or venomous? Because I try to word things so I don't put myself in a position to get my feelings hurt, because I am very sensitive and I will cry. And he'll be like, no, nothing. And I'm like, we live together. There are definitely things I do that like bother you. And I'm like, just tell me, it's fine. He'll be like, and it's just little things. It's never, you don't text me enough. It's like, well, I really don't like that you don't put the lids on completely on things. And I'm like,
wow, I have that problem too.
With Jamila?
Yes.
I think it's, I don't know what it is.
Actually, I've never heard of that before. And it's not like I intentionally do that. I thought it was just the type of Tupperware that I have. That it's She just doesn't come on. I don't have time for this. And you just move on.
Oh my gosh. No, I don't put the lid on anything. He'll like pick up bottles and like the liquid will fly.
Oh God.
He's like, Annissia. And I'm like, I feel like at this point maybe you should expect it. Which kind of is counterintuitive because I asked him so I could work on those things.
Yeah.
And I try to be more conscious of it.
But now he knows that you're not intentionally doing it to
yes.
piss him off.
Exactly.
I mean, even if he somehow thought it before, like, again, that's how you like start making stuff up.
Yeah.
She's intentionally doing this to like, piss me off. I'm gonna cut her off. That's it. I'm moving out. What? Why? Because you're trying to go. You're trying to drive me crazy. You're a venomous person. What? All along, she just didn't put the lids on the thing.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Like randomly, like what's coming to my mind is A Marriage Story, I think is the name of the movie on Netflix. Have you ever seen it? Any chance? Or heard of it?
Is that the one with Scarlett Johansson?
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen you know how they give you a little preview? I've seen that, but...
Yeah.
Is it sappy? Because I don't like sappy movies.
No, it's actually not.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of the opposite. Oh. I think that, in fact, it's probably up your alley. Horror? The chaos? No.
Oh, just chaos?
Yeah,
okay.
Chaos and fighting. And,
yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was too much for me personally. I mean, I like... But it was, like, interesting because I was, like, watching it, and as a relationship guy, I'm like, what? Because they're trying to divorce, and it's like, what exactly is the problem here? Like, why do they just keep on fighting and bickering? And they're fighting, like, heavy, you know? Yeah. And then it's like, I think that a lot of it was slippery slope. Mm-hmm. Like, they just, oh, you forgot to put the lid on? That means that you hate me, and this, that. I'm taking the kid. We're leaving. Wait, how did this... Maybe if you just communicated... Again, we're going to be referring back to number one, because that's just the umbrella of it all. Like, if you just communicated that you don't like that the lid is on. Now, you might be like Annissia, and you don't put the lid on, but, you know.
I try to remember.
Yeah, but, like, all in all, like, that's not, like, you can still tell that that's, like, the intentions of the person, like, now you can have, like, more patience with them.
Yeah. And
so I think that's a really big one. For number 3, I've written, is it possible to redefine/recalibrate? And what I mean by that is, again, talking to the person, or maybe you might not even, in this situation, maybe you don't even talk to the person, but you kind of are like, okay, me and Annissia, we used to like engage on this level, and we like had this type of dynamic, but recently she's been really busy with school and maybe hanging out with Nick too much, and maybe I've been doing that. I don't know. Whatever it might be. And so now it's like, okay, I'm just going to readjust my expectations of this dynamic. I'm not cutting her off. I'm not about to block her. I'm not about to unfollow her from social media. It's just like, okay, maybe we're just in a different time of our friendship right now. And that's okay. You know, maybe it'll get back up to there with time. Maybe when I go and communicate, once again, then she'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even like notice that it was declining. Or, yeah, I did notice it was declining. We will get back up there. I'm sorry, I can't afford to give that much anymore, but I'd still love to be friends with you. Or communicate it and it's like, yeah, I don't think I can give as much as you need in a friendship anymore or whatever, which is a sad situation, but, you know, it is what it is at that point. It's just like, dang, you know. So, like, look at it, like, you know, and see, is this a dynamic that could be like readjusted or redefined in some way, shape, or form? Like how they say define the relationship, DTR. Like, okay, like how are we going to redefine our friendship? How are we going to redefine our relationship? Whether it's cousins, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's mother and son, whatever it might be.
Was that a thing from Jersey Shore, DTR?
Oh, was it? I don't know. I've never watched.
I feel like I've heard
never
that on
watched
Jersey Shore
before, but they probably do say it. Like, I've never watched
the relationship.
It before. Yeah, I just heard it. I just saw it like a few times. Like, yeah, so DTR. It's like, oh yeah, that's
no,
good. It's a good phrase.
Yeah.
Good phrase. Like,
yeah.
Because then, you know, it's like, oh, I thought we were talking.
Yeah.
What? No, I'm chilling. like, well, that's good to know. So I gotta communicate.
So I think it's also important, like, to understand that relationships aren't just going to be linear. Like, there's going to be those declines. There's going to be times where it's, like, very high. Like, you're at the peak of the roller coaster and, like, you're hanging out, like, every other day. You text a lot. You call a lot. And then, like, it can drastically go back down. But, like, I think that's just understanding, like, life is going on. Things happen. People get busy, like you said, school, work, all that stuff. But I think you just, as a person, you just have to be a little patient in the relationships that you have, because we're all just doing our best out here.
Yeah.
And trying to communicate. I feel like we can all improve somehow. I mean, there's always room for improvement, but you got to be a little patient.
For sure.
With people. But always communicate.
Always communicate.
Yes.
Always go back to number one.
Yeah. It's so easy to send a text and be like, hey, like, how you been? What's going on? Or just,
can we talk?
Yeah, exactly. Well, don't text people, hey, can we talk?
Oh.
Anxiety exists. We will freak out.
No, that's
Please
true,
don't
though.
do that.
That is true, though. I feel like, usually, yeah. But maybe this is my venomous trait. I use that to an advantage sometimes. I don't text the person to give them that anxiety, but I'm aware that it might give them that anxiety, and then therefore it's like, okay, if I know that that's going to be an incentive for them to want to hang out more, or meet up quicker, then cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna, like, light a fire under their butt, so, like, now we can, like, more quickly, like, you know, get to something. Whereas, like, if I tell them maybe, like, what I want to talk to them about or whatever, they might be like, oh, well, you know, I can put that, like, on the bottom of my to-do list, and that could also be another sign, you know? So yeah, but use that with discretion. Don't model after me with that.
No, because I feel like no matter what I am doing, if I get a text or any type of message on any platform that says, hey, can we talk? I know I'm going to stop everything I'm doing and be like, what is wrong?
Exactly, yeah. And I will definitely be the type to be like, yeah, we just really need to talk, and we just meet up. Like, when is the soonest that we can meet up, Annissia? Knowing how Annissia would be, it's like, tomorrow. Or tonight.
But, what are you doing right now, actually?
Yeah, and then it's like, great, quicker to get into communication, whereas, you know, maybe someone else like, oh, this is what you want to talk about? Maybe next week. Oh, sorry, we can't. And after that, that's when I'd start to reassess, like, yeah, I'm not really as much of a priority anymore. Now it's time to make some changes, you know. And we all know, too, like, because we're going into the new year, so there's going to be a lot of people that are getting left in 2020.
Here we go.
Yeah, and
they say that every year.
Yeah, and
which is
so
fine.
It's like,
I mean, some people
need to be left.
Yeah,
because this is not a video on how, like, just to never cut someone off. But it's to know when to cut someone off. So we're trying to give, like, both sides, like, things to really consider. Like, have you gone through this kind of checklist before? You're like, no, dude, you should really cut her off now. Like, that's really something.
I wanted to touch on a point that you made earlier where you, I think the main bullet was if you can recalibrate that.
Oh, yeah.
And try to maybe, like, fix that communication or the lack thereof, which obviously my ex-boyfriend, whatever, we dated for 6 years, so I learned a lot. So sorry I keep referring back to him.
No.
But I feel like there were a lot of good life lessons. So we tried, you know, it's like, okay, you sit down, you're like, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I expect out of you, like, what do you expect out of me? And it's like, okay, well, can we meet those expectations, like, realistically? And then at the time, we'd be like, yeah, like, we can easily do that to be with each other. And then, you know, it lasts for, like, a few days, maybe a week or so. And then those, like, same habits, like, float to the surface again. And then it's like, okay, we are in the exact same spot that we were 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Like, it didn't even last that long. Which I think, like, that's when you, like, it's okay to just cut that person off, essentially.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you try.
Yeah.
You can have like a good, civil, mature conversation and lay it all out there on the table. Just so like there's no gaps in communication or expectations or anything. And then if you both like mutually agree, like, yes, those are reasonable. And then you can't, like, I feel like that's a good indicator, like, all right, this isn't gonna work. We tried the recalibration, like it's not healthy for us to be together.
Yeah.
Not that we're unhealthy people, like you mentioned before, but it's like we aren't compatible like that anymore. So
Yeah, for sure. And actually that goes into number 4, which I titled Repeated Offenses. So how many times has someone repeated this same offense? Like, oh, Annissia, I told you to start putting the lids on the Tupperware. If I spill one more juice, I'm breaking up with you. Like, and I mean that's dramatic, but maybe homeboy really can't take spilling juice no more, and he knows that if he gets married to a woman who keeps on causing him to spill juice, it's gonna drive him crazy, and so then. To me, that's kind of like, that would be, obviously, in my opinion, like a very strange deal breaker. But at least homeboy communicated in this situation. He communicated that it bothered him, and he pretty much like made it clear like this really is like whatever. And Annissia probably did try, but it just keeps on happening, and eventually you just come to a point and you're just like, dang, is this something that I can live with my partner, with my friend? Or am I going to forever be spilling juice everywhere I go?
So dramatic for juice. It really doesn't happen like that, I promise. It's not just like liquids all over the kitchen.
But on a serious note, like, you really do have to like think about it. Like, is this something that like I've already voiced it to this person and they just keep on making the same mistake? They're hopefully going to continue to try to be better, but is this something that I can just accept with my friend and just like move on? Or is this really something that's like, nah, like I really can't deal with this. I'm sorry. I feel like we're going to have to part ways. And if that's the case, it's sad, but I can respect it from there. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a respectable digression, in my opinion. So yeah, like repeated offenses, have a thought process. And just because you forgive someone does not mean that you have to continue to put up with whatever they are putting out.
Yeah, I also think that it's okay to deal with some things. Like me not putting the lids on all the way. It's just yes.
No, don't settle with someone.
Fine.
Like no, go on.
Like with Nick, I feel like it's something that he can deal with. Like, there's, like, little things that it's like, okay, I'm not used to this. However, it's not really hindering me and my mental health or really negatively affecting me. So,
Does he leave the toilet seat up?
No, he grew up with all women in the house. So,
Same.
Which I mentioned that before. I was like, because our roommate always... and he uses, like, the one downstairs where everyone uses. And I'm like, if anything, you would think to put that one down.
Right.
And I brought that up, and I was like, yeah, Nick, you, like, never do that. And he was like, I grew up with all women. Yeah. That wasn't an option for me.
Yeah.
Which I think it's important to consider upbringings and what they've been exposed to, and try to consider those other factors, and like I said, be patient, because some things you can deal with, and it's okay. They may be a little annoying, but it shouldn't be a deal breaker. Yeah. Considering on what it is.
Yeah, know your deal breakers.
Yes, know your boundaries, know your limits. Obviously, like, don't settle for people who don't provide any, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't help, like, your personal growth or, like, maintain healthy relationships or bring anything good to you. So know your boundaries.
Yeah, for sure.
Something else to consider is, do they drain you? Which I think is also another subjective thing to consider. But from personal experience, I would hang out with my ex, a different ex, the one you met. That was actually crazy.
Yeah. My gosh.
And hanging out with him, I would feel like mentally just like so exhausted. Because it's like I have to entertain this person because like they didn't want any other friends. They didn't want me to have any other friends. It's like, you're all I need. Like, it should be the same way about me. And so it's like constant like interaction and entertainment and trying, like, even a little like reassurance, like, yes, I'm with you, like, you have my attention, I'm not texting other boys. And that, oh my gosh, that was literally draining.
Yeah. No, I could even tell, like, this dude, he used to pull up to our job, like, back when we both worked at Buffalo Wild Wings previously. Now we both work at the new fancier restaurant
Downtown.
Yeah, but he used to pull up at our old job, and I just remember, I mean, I'm not going to say too much about it, but I just remember I didn't even know who this cat was. Like, she was bartending, and I was just, like, talking to her, and then all of a sudden, the dude, I thought he was, like, one of the regulars or something. He's like, oh, yeah, you know, I was talking to somebody else, and I was like, yeah, I don't even know how old Annissia is. And then he was like, oh, yeah, she's this age. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, true. He's like, yeah, because, you know, her birthday is in December, blah, blah, coming up, by the way. Yeah, her birthday is, true. Her birthday is December, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, true. And I'm thinking to myself, how the heck does this regular know Annissia's birthday? Like, maybe I'm the bad friend. I don't know, like, what's going on. But then we, like, I forgot even how that went. But, like, he was, like, just continued to, like, ask me questions, like, try to, like, prove that, like, something. And then I immediately, like, it clicked. I was like, oh, this must be her boyfriend. Okay. And, yeah, and he's like, yeah, you know, when are you gonna, try to have a date with Annissia, or, like, you know, one of your friendship dates? And I'm just like, because I used to take out Annissia and, like, a couple of guys and other people at the place, like, just have, like, one-on-one, like, talks, just a couple of them. And, yeah, it was just, like, I told him, I was like, oh, well, you know, I actually don't think this is going to happen. And he's like, oh, wow, I was actually looking forward to that. It just was so weird. Like, yeah, but I could tell, like, that he was, like, a monitor type of person. That definitely had to be, like, draining for you. And it's just,
yeah, and, like, it even, like, went into my workplace. So, like, I would be working and he would just show up and he would sit there, like, my entire shift. And I would literally try to interact with customers. And it's like, what did you just talk about? And it's like, that is draining, but also it's like abusive and very, very toxic.
Yeah.
Like, that does not provide any positive influence on any part of your life. Like, and I tried to set boundaries, and, you know, it didn't work. Try communicating, it didn't work. Like, hey, I don't like when you do this. Like, I don't like when you show up to my work like this. I don't like that you talk to my friends that way or talk to me that way. And it wouldn't change. And like, I kept dealing with it for, I think we were together for like 3 months, which even that was far too long to deal with that. But it got to the point where I knew my limits and I was able to cut him off because it was very toxic. And just not good. At all.
For sure. And I'm really glad that it got to that point too, because I was so proud of her. I love Nick, like, very, very, very much. He's great. And yeah, I definitely see them going, like, the long run. He's an ISFP, by the way. So any ESFJ, ISFP dynamics out there, it's like, this is proof that they work out, actually, after all. Sometimes.
And it's good and healthy.
Yes. All in all, like, if you find yourself being, like, depleted of energy from this friendship, from this relationship, whatever it might be, that's probably a really good sign. that, yeah, it is time to cut this person off, and reconsider some different avenues. So that's 5 things to consider when you're trying to cut someone off. Like 5 things to consider when cutting someone off.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask right before we close out. You said something earlier. You said that you did have toxic friendships, but you didn't really like learn as much from them as you did like from the relationships, which obviously like normal and everything like that. But I'm curious, would you say that it was because you didn't value the friendships as much, or was it because they weren't just nearly as bad as the relationships that you were in, or you didn't pay attention to the friendships as much, like the lessons that they could have taught you? Like, why do you think that is?
Okay, my friend even asked me this while I was in college, because she was like, Annissia, if we stopped being friends, would you cry? And I was like, no, like, why would I? And she was like, are you kidding me? We've been friends for like 3 years. You wouldn't cry? And I was like, I don't think so. And, which, I mean, that made me think of, like, why? Like, why would I feel that way about a friend? But I think it's because, like, with, like...
Come in. Is it open?
Yeah, it's unlocked.
Come in.
I have to just walk in. I'm so sorry. Don't get murdered. So I think the things I considered were that there's more dynamics to like a relationship because of like the intimacy, sex, to put it out there, the family dynamics of them, like, okay, you get to meet my mom, my siblings, you get to come to more family functions, and just the like everyday consideration of their feelings. I think that, to me personally, that makes the bond more intense.
For sure.
For me. And I mean, I still have those things with friendships. Like, I would bring this friend in particular that I mentioned. Like, she would come with me to, like, my grandma's house to just, like, have dinner. But it was, like, very casual. It wasn't like, okay, I'm bringing you here so my family can meet you and kind of approve of you. Right. Like they would with a significant other.
Yeah.
So I just feel like the dynamics that I take into consideration with a partner just seems to be like more intimate and like intense for me than with friendships. So I think maybe that's why it's easier to cut them off. Yeah. Or if they aren't in my life, then it's easier to cope with. Because it does take a lot for me to cut people off, and I usually just wait for them to do it. Because I don't like confrontation either, so... Yeah, does that make sense?
No, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I was like trying to stay focused and even talk a little louder because you are distracting, sir.
Well, it's okay. We won't say anything about how you're stroking the bottle. That's not Nick, by the way.
No.
Nick is a much more civil person.
Civilized human.
Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that I always talk about how, of course, I believe that romantic relationships are more important than platonic relationships. Inherently, because they dive deeper into a lot more like avenues, like with your in-laws, for example, if you're like married and stuff like that, like children, stuff like that. But I guess like a lot of things for me too is that like, well, let's also make sure not to devalue the platonic friendships that we have at times like that. And I wasn't trying to call you out, but it's just a curiosity that I'm always having, like, why do we have a tendency to seemingly like devalue or like and heavily idealize romantic relationships and stuff like that? But anyway, my channel hears me talk about that enough times, so we're not going to get too deep into that. Thank y'all for watching. Thank you, Annissia,
Yes.
for being on this podcast/video. And people should would you recommend people follow you on Twitter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my Twitter's a little. No, I think my Twitter feed's good.
Okay. All right.
It's not like Denzel's though. Like, as in the sense where yours seems to provoke like intellectual conversations. I feel like where mine, I'm usually sharing memes, really stupid videos, or things that just like talk crap about men.
Oh yeah,
that's just how I am.
I've muted the word men on my timeline for over a year now, and and we did have a conversation recently. I happened to catch that tweet.
What was my tweet?
It was something about, so that score on Snapchat, is it another way for men to try to control us, or the patriarchy and stuff like that? And I literally read that and I'm like, what the freak is, what does that have anything to do with men? Like, and I just
it was
so
socially constructed by men.
Just so y'all know, I consider myself to be a feminist. I support women out here. Oh, show them your little tattoo. We are so totally going off.
Oh, that's okay. They'll have a good like little debrief session.
Yes.
Yes, my Frida Kahlo.
Yeah. So yeah, we are in support of women over here, but just that tweet in particular I thought was like really just but yes, thank y'all for watching again. Hopefully this helped save a relationship. But also, you know, if maybe this was the last nail.
Is it the straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah. Yes, the straw that broke the camel's back for you to just end that friendship, relationship, whatever it might be with this person. And if you've considered all 5 of these things and that's the conclusion that you came to, that's all right. So yeah, thanks again for watching and done.